Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, new restrictions on living in cars. After hearing complaints from beach communities, the mayor says the city needs a new approach. And the San Diego Zoo's giant pandas are leaving. We'll tell you how much longer they'll be on display.
In certain parts of town, maybe resources could be directed there. So for me, the hope is that the information will help improve or even save lives.
New access was recently granted to local death records. The medical examiner's office tells us how the information might improve public health.
Even if I'm on the slightest of hills that I don't even think would qualify, I make sure to grant my wills because I just don't want another $65 ticket.
And will cramping is a money maker for the city. We'll show you where hundreds of tickets are issued. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Monday, March 25th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer wants new rules on where people can live in their cars. Last month, the city repealed its vehicle habitation ordinance. But as KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman explains, people are complaining.
The city of San Diego had an ordinance that banned people from living in their vehicles, but a group of people who are disabled sued the city, saying the law was discriminatory. And last year, a judge issued an injunction prohibiting enforcement of the law, and the city council ultimately voted to repeal it.
This has undoubtedly disrupted the quality of life in our neighborhoods throughout the entire city. And we are here today to announce that we are going to bring forward a new ordinance next month that will once again make it illegal to live in your car in San Diego neighborhoods.
The mayor says people living in their vehicles has been causing quality of life issues.
My office and several of the city council offices have received hundreds of emails and calls complaining about trash, about drug use, public urination, and more as a result of individuals that have been taking advantage of our city and acting inappropriately. This is not safe, this is not healthy, and this is not acceptable.
The city says the beaches are most impacted by people living in their cars, not necessarily because people are homeless, but rather using neighborhoods as vacation spots.
If you are living out of your vehicle because you have nowhere else to go, there is and will be help for you.
Already, the city partners with a nonprofit that has 2 parking lots where people can park and sleep overnight. The city says at least 2 more locations have been identified for cars and RVs. When the city was barred from enforcing its original vehicle habitation ordinance, a judge said the law was vague and randomly enforced. It's unclear what the language in this new proposed ordinance will be. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The mayor plans to introduce the new ordinance next month to the City Council's Public Safety and Livable Neighborhoods Committee. San Diego will have to pay for its mistakes regarding pension reform. That was the decision today from a state court of appeal. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has more on the Proposition B ruling.
The ruling affects about 4,000 city employees, from 911 operators to traffic engineers, who've been earning retirement benefits in private 401k accounts instead of guaranteed pensions. This follows a state Supreme Court ruling last summer that found city officials violated state labor laws when they placed Prop B on the ballot. The court ordered the city to pay the affected employees the difference between what they have earned and what they should have been earning if they'd been in the pension system, plus 7% interest. Now, the court did not invalidate Prop B. That will have to take place through a separate legal process. It's unclear how much the ruling's implementation will cost city taxpayers. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
The Sheriff's Department is investigating an arson at an Escondido mosque as a possible hate crime. Investigators say graffiti was found that mentioned the deadly attacks in New Zealand. The fire happened early Sunday morning. 7 people were inside. They were not hurt and managed to put the fire out while calling 911. The fire caused minor damage. The local chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations says it will work with mosques on security plans. The San Diego Police Department is speaking with the community tonight about a new anti-profiling law. KPBS reporter Tara Minto says the decision is part of the religious community's efforts to improve police-community relations.
The talk with the San Diego Police Lieutenant will focus on the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. The discussion is part of a series hosted by faith-based leaders to inform communities about the rights and responsibilities of both the police and the public. Past attendee Xochitl Jamarillo says this gives both sides a baseline of understanding.
It's good to know what it is that is expected from everybody, pretty much, before we go around, I guess, pointing fingers.
The talk on the anti-profiling law at the Bayview Baptist Church is the final of 6 sessions. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
Organizers hope to hold more sessions after reviewing feedback. More people are dying from accidents in San Diego, while fewer people are dying from homicides. The San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office has released 22 years of death report data, and it has made this information public. Dr. Campman, the Medical Examiner's Office has released 22 years of death record data. Why make this public?
It's for the public's good. The information represents 59,400 and something people's lives and their causes of death. We've included their age, race, sex, their cause of death, manner of death, how the injury or death occurred, and it's all for the public.
And I have the third quarter comparison report here, which compares the first 3 quarters of 2018 to the first 3 quarters of 2017. And it shows that the total number of cases are up. The rate of accidental deaths are up about 5%. Homicides are down by about 4%. And suicides are also down by about 2%. How significant are these changes?
Well, they may not be statistically significant. So overall, we need to look at the population size, and the population size for the county is up this year compared to last year. So it makes sense that the total overall number of deaths is up. For the homicides, it's good news that the death rate is down a little bit, but that little bit, because the number of homicides is relatively small compared to the other manners of death, it could actually only represent 2 or 3 deaths difference. So overall, the number is pretty similar.
There's been a lot reported about the impact of fentanyl. What are you seeing?
We are seeing more deaths due to fentanyl. So in years gone by, the deaths we saw were due to people that had prescribed fentanyl and put, instead of 1 patch on every 2 or 3 days, they would put 2 or 3 patches on and get too much of the medicine and overdose like that. But in the recent years, we've seen fentanyl, illicit fentanyl. So people either buy what they think is cocaine and get fentanyl, or buy what they think is an oxycodone pill, and it's actually a counterfeit oxycodone pill that is made with fentanyl. And they overdose in that way and die. So we are seeing, of the deaths due to opioids, the percentage that are due to fentanyl has really increased over the last few years.
And I can understand releasing this information to agencies, news organizations, police departments, but why make it available in a database for just the average person?
It's because it's not ours. The information belongs to the people. We do recognize the privacy of the people that have died and their families, and for that reason we don't give anyone's name or their medical examiner's case number. We are trying to balance the public's interest in releasing the information with the private interests of the families.
So from a medical examiner's perspective, what about the data release stands out to you?
Well, it's what I've always seen. Things that I've seen and observed, now the public can see too. For instance, I think it'll be interesting for people to know that when we say so many deaths are due to methamphetamine, that people will be able to see how many are due to methamphetamine with other drugs, or how many people died of heroin with alcohol or benzodiazepine. So to me, this information gives more than just the annual reports we've been giving.
Dr. Stephen Campman, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
While it's unclear if Robert Mueller's report on the Russia investigation will be made public, President Trump says it vindicates him. AP reporter Kelly Daschle has more on the early conclusions drawn by the president's attorney general.
Bringing to a close a probe that has shadowed President Donald Trump for nearly 2 years, the Justice Department said Sunday that special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation did not find evidence that Trump's campaign conspired or coordinated with Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election. Mueller also investigated whether Trump obstructed justice but did not come to a definitive answer. In a 4-page letter to Congress summarizing Mueller's report, Attorney General William Barr said the report does not exonerate the president on obstruction and instead sets out evidence on both sides of the question. President Trump immediately claimed vindication.
There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration. It's a shame that our country had to go through this.
In reality, Mueller's investigation left open the question of whether Trump obstructed justice by firing FBI Director James Comey and drafting an incomplete explanation about his son's meeting with a Russian lawyer during the campaign. That left it to the Attorney General to decide. Barr said he and his deputy, Rod Rosenstein, determined the evidence is, quote, not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Democrats vowed to press on with their own investigations. Kelly Daschle, Associated Press.
Democrats and Republicans demanding the full release of the report.
In response to conclusions from the special counsel's report,
Special Counsel Robert Mueller has delivered his final report to the Department of Justice.
A groundbreaking collaboration between Frontline and PBS NewsHour.
There are no further indictments being recommended. That's a big deal.
Analysis and the potential
I
impact.
think there will be evidence described in the report that we don't yet know.
And the dramatic events that led the country to this moment.
The Attorney General looked at me and said, "We've had to fire the director of the FBI." I immediately sensed that everything had changed.
The Mueller report.
You know, he was announced as special counsel, and I just go, oh my God, because this is a guy that doesn't leave any stone unturned.
Tonight at 8 on KPBS.
We will continue to see clear skies and a bit of a warm-up this week. Erin Calandra has details in tonight's forecast.
Well, I certainly hope you had a great day as we kick off the new work week. The weather is pretty nice. Notice the jet stream is far to the north of us, leaving us wide open for beautiful conditions, lots of sunshine. Our temperatures, they'll be increasing throughout the week. Now, notice there is some rain to the north of us. We could see some showers eventually reaching as far south as Los Angeles, but we expect San Diego to stay nice and dry, although we could see an extra cloud or two popping up by midweek. So here's the satellite and radar locally. Not much going on. It's looking pretty good and nice and dry. Tonight in the metro, 54 degrees, mostly clear skies, and it will stay quiet for everyone. Oceanside at 46, Borrego Springs 55, and Chula Vista reaching 51 for those low temperatures. Look at tomorrow, even better. We still have that sunshine. It's still nice and warm. All that precipitation is staying to the north of us, so a great day to be outside. Put on those sunglasses before you leave the house. Oceanside at 67, Ramona reaching 74 degrees for the high, and Mount Laguna sunny with some clouds at 61 degrees. Taking a look at the coast along this week, expect to see a couple extra clouds again midweek by Wednesday, but toward the end of the week, sunny and dry, and by Saturday, we're up to 74 degrees for the high temperature. Inland, we'll see our temperatures getting a bit cooler by Thursday, but rebounding. And look at Saturday, we're up to 80 degrees with some sunshine. In the deserts, it is going to become a bit breezy toward the end of the week, so temperatures are increasing to the 80s, but you might have some gustier conditions through those passes. The canyons, expect to see some of that. And in the mountains, it's going to be pretty nice, although getting a bit cooler. Sunny with temperatures dipping down to those 50s for the rest of the week. And our overnights, they are still in the 30s, so bundle it up if you're heading out during those nighttime hours. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
The San Diego Zoo is known for its giant pandas, but that's about to end. The 2 remaining pandas will return to China next month. The zoo announced the news this morning, saying April 27th will be their last day in San Diego. That's when the zoo's loan program with the Chinese government comes to an end. Zoo staff are planning a celebration of the pandas for the coming weeks. The zoo says it will continue to work with China on new ways to help the species. 4 people in San Diego have recently been hospitalized with superbug infections. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy tells us county health officials are warning local doctors for a second time to be on the lookout.
2 people in San Diego remain hospitalized, and 1 person is under care at a nursing facility after contracting a potentially deadly bacterial infection at a Tijuana hospital.
Right now, these patients are treatable, but we want to make sure that no one else gets that infection.
Dr. Eric McDonald is medical director of epidemiology for the County of San Diego. He says there is no evidence of secondary infections related to the hospitalized cases.
All of the patients who were hospitalized in San Diego had their infections recognized early and were treated with the appropriate infection precautions. They're called contact precautions to make sure that the bacteria doesn't spread to anyone else.
The county and the Centers for Disease Control first warned the community in January to avoid Grandview Hospital in Tijuana, where officials say the outbreak began. Most patients had undergone elective weight loss surgeries. Since then, the number of cases among U.S. citizens has more than doubled.
The CDC has identified 20 confirmed cases and 5 suspect cases.
The bacteria, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, can spread through poorly cleaned medical equipment and from healthcare workers to patients. It's listed by the CDC as a top threat among microbes.
There are combinations of drugs that can be used to treat this infection, but it is very difficult. There are some last-ditch, last-line antibiotics that can be used in combination with other drugs to fight this infection.
Dr. McDonald says the outbreak is not a threat to the general public, but people traveling outside the country for medical procedures need to take precautions.
It's very important that they do good research on where they're going to go for the treatment that they're going to get.
According to the CDC, the superbug bacteria kills more than 400 people per year in the United States. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Apple is expanding its business model and taking on Netflix. The company announced several new products today aimed at how people consume media. The rollout includes a streaming TV service much like Netflix, but that will be available this fall. It will also feature original movies and shows with major partners like Steven Spielberg and Oprah Winfrey. Apple also introduced a new video game platform, new subscription plan, and a new Apple-branded credit card. The San Diego City Attorney's Office has settled a lawsuit with a Mission Bay restaurant over false advertising. The lawsuit accused Barefoot Bar and Grill of failing to clearly disclose to customers a 3% surcharge added to every bill. Restaurants across the city started tacking on the surcharge in 2017. They said it was needed to deal with a rising minimum wage and other costs. The charges are legal as long as businesses make sure customers are aware. The $34,000 settlement will go into a city fund for a consumer education and minimum wage investigations.
Only $3 minimum ride for 5 years.
Rideshare drivers in San Diego are demanding higher wages. Dozens of people who work for Uber and Lyft protested today outside of the San Diego International Airport. They're demanding companies pay drivers a minimum of $28 an hour. The drivers say these companies continue to cut their pay and take a majority of the profits.
We put 100% of expense into driving those passengers around. So why should we take the mouse's share of the fare? We should take the majority of the share.
According to Indeed.com, the average salary for a full-time Uber driver is $40,000 a year. Every month, San Diego issues more than 1,000 tickets for drivers who don't turn their wheels when parked on a hill. KPBS investigative reporter Claire Tragesser looks at where this is happening and how drivers can avoid it.
My parents were visiting from Missouri.
Sarah Linke was visiting Old Town with her parents and had the good fortune of finding a parking spot.
We had parked here on this street and didn't see any signs when we parked, came back to the car, had a ticket.
The ticket was for not cramping her car's wheels.
And then we looked to see if there was a sign, and there was a sign way at the top of the hill, but I mean, it wasn't even within sight.
San Diego's parking rules say you have to cramp your wheels on any hill with a slope of 3% or greater, whether or not there's a sign. But how would you know what constitutes a 3% slope?
Hold this level for me, just elevate this side until we get that bubble falls between those two lines.
David Ramirez is with the San Diego Police Traffic Division.
I will measure from the opposite side to get the rise.
He usually measures slopes when investigating traffic collisions. To do it, you need a level, a tape measure, and some middle school math. For those who need a refresher, here you go. The length of the level is 48 inches. Ramirez holds it level with one end touching the higher ground, then measures the distance from the other end to the lower ground, or 1.25 inches. Those are the two sides of a right triangle, and the slope is the rise over the run, or in this case, 2.6%, so not the 3% slope required to cramp your wheels. But he says police don't usually take this measurement when writing wheel cramping tickets.
If anyone is going to be writing tickets for not cramping the wheels on the slope, then they have already done their homework. They already know on this certain roadway at this location, they'll have the slope written down somewhere.
But that may not always be true.
Most tickets are written in areas that have slope greater than 3%.
Justin Palmer is an expert in Geographic Information Systems Mapping, or GIS. He created a map of all the points where wheel cramping tickets were written in San Diego since 2015. It was more than 40,000 tickets. Then he compared that with a map of elevations and slopes and found some tickets may have been written where they shouldn't have been.
It did come out in the data that close to 10%, or maybe even a little over 10% of these points could have potentially been written in slopes less than 3%.
But it's a little tricky to say this for sure. The wheel cramping ticket is supposed to be based on the slope of the exact location of where you parked your car. But a police officer writing a ticket might not put down the exact address, sometimes just a nearby intersection or the entire city block. I went out with Palmer to test out some of the points he'd found for tickets that might have been written unfairly.
So this specific location is coming up level.
So this, you would not need to cramp your wheels here.
Yeah, you would not need to cramp your wheels here.
But when we walked just a little down the street, we found there was a 3% slope.
Yeah, like this is about exactly 3% right here.
Got it.
And you can see from just kind of looking at it that it's not that steep.
This was the other important takeaway. A 3% slope really doesn't look like much. It was a barely perceptible hill. Palmer says the data shows you really should always cramp your wheels to avoid a ticket. He says the most common spots to get a ticket are downtown, uptown, and around colleges.
So there's the sign there about cramping your wheels.
Sarah Linke, who learned this wheel cramping lesson the hard way, says she won't make the mistake again.
And even if I'm on the slightest of hills that I don't even think would qualify, I make sure to cramp my wheels because I just don't want another $65 ticket.
Claire Tragesser, KPBS News.
To look at a map of where wheel cramping tickets are written, head to kpbs.org/will. Now here's a recap of tonight's top stories. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer says the city will revisit an ordinance on people living in their cars. The city's ban was repealed last month. Since then, the city has received complaints from beach communities. The mayor is expecting to formally introduce new rules next month. A state court of appeals says the city of San Diego must pay for mistakes in its pension reform measure. The ruling affects about 4,000 city employees. Today's ruling follows a state Supreme Court ruling that found city officials violated state labor laws when they placed Proposition B on the ballot. The sheriff's department is treating an arson at a mosque in Escondido as a possible hate crime. The fire happened Sunday morning while some people were inside. They put the fire out and called 911. Deputies say they found graffiti referencing the mosque attack in New Zealand. Here's a look of what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Stopping fentanyl at the border on Morning Edition. Local prosecutors say more of the dangerous drug is being smuggled through the San Ysidro port of entry. And on Midday Edition, how a near miss may lead to a big fine against the operators of the San Onofre. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.